Hi, everyone. It's Russell Kern at the Trailblazing Leader podcast. It's been a while since we've connected, and I'm excited to let you know that I'm expanding the concept that the Trailblazing Leaders podcast is going to cover to include a very important topic called collaboration. And you might say, why collaboration? Well, Amazon laid off 14,000 people just a while ago because it'd gotten so heavy they couldn't collaborate effectively or make important decisions. And we'll get into why that is such a crucial topic in this age of AI. As a matter of fact, it was such an important topic that I just finished my new book, Transform or Die: How to Develop Teams That Outthink and Outpace and Outprofit the Competition in the AI Age. It's available on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle, paperback, or hard copy. And if you stay to the end of the program, I will tell you how you can get the first 3 chapters with my compliments, as well as access to the 10 assessment tools that I use to help evaluate human and AI collaboration. So today, we're going to talk with one of my partners, Joretha Johnson, who is the definitive expert in manufacturing and operating systems. She holds a master's degree from Case Western University. She is an engineer, and she has focused on helping organizations develop operating systems that improve their bottom line results, improve their customer service quality, and improve their product quality through developing operating systems, which at its core involve relational intelligence, coaching, and feedback with authenticity. So let's just jump right into the conversation and let you explore those topics. And again, stay to the end and I'll let you know how to get 3 chapters of Transform or Die with my compliments. All right, let's go. Joretha, why don't we just start sharing your background and how we got together, and then we have a lot to cover.
Yes, we have a lot of ground to cover here. Russell, you and I got together. We met each other through our shared passion for appreciative inquiry.
Yes, we did.
And I was thinking that it might be helpful for you to understand like how I even came to become aware of appreciative inquiry and what made me such a believer in this methodology. So I was a plant manager with Procter & Gamble. As you know, I worked with Procter & Gamble for over 25 years. My background is engineering, and I consider myself a very good problem solver. And
I think that's true.
I think that's why I became an engineer. It was all about problem solving. And I was working in what we call our baby care business unit, working with the Pampers and Love's brands. And our vice president, we were sitting around talking about our culture and what worked, what didn't work. And we thought we have one of the most exciting brands in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar brand. And lots of great technology associated with that process, with the process of making diapers and products for babies. But we were thinking sometimes we had a difficult time attracting people and keeping people. People felt like the workplace was pretty intense. The environment wasn't the greatest. And so he asked me if I would kind of look into that and see what was going on and see if there were some action steps we could take. And so one of my good friends, I'd never heard of this field of organization development. I didn't know that the work that we did was called organization development. And there was a field of study around that. And so I had a really good friend, Martha White, who had a degree in organization development, the only person I knew at that time. And she talked with me. She said, "Have you heard of this methodology called appreciative inquiry?" And I said, "No." And so she gave me a book. I looked at the book and I saw David Cooperrider's name. And David Cooperrider was at Case Western Reserve University. And that was my alma mater. That's where I had my undergraduate degree. And by serendipity, my last semester at Case Western Reserve, I needed an elective, and I took an elective in our organization development department. And at that time, I had no idea that Case Western Reserve was one of the first universities that offered a degree in OD, that we had this world famous OD department. And I took this class and it really set up my career. It set me up for my career in Procter & Gamble. And so I read about this methodology and applied it in that situation, instead of looking at why people don't want to work in this business unit, we created a positive, affirmative topic of what causes a magnetic work environment. And we had focus groups, and we talked with people about, what attracts and holds people. That's the magnetic piece. What attracts people and then holds them in place. And as people started describing the experiences they had in the workplace, it really ignited a different level of energy around what team building and what was possible. So we ended up with a totally different set of action steps versus if we approach this from the deficit perspective. And so it was very successful. And that was my first introduction.
And what's interesting is I was tasked to develop a manager training program for senior leaders for one of our clients. And one of my partners had said have you heard about this thing called appreciative inquiry? And let me just show you what it's about. And through that exploration came my own signing up at Case Western to be certified with Ron and David, and then us getting introduced through David, and our both shared passion about the positive energy. And when you spoke and we used the positive appreciative inquiry process, I was completely convinced this is what humans need to thrive. This is what we as managers, but I also know it's a skill that when we carry a lot of old baggage, stereotypes, poor training, successful individuals put into manager roles, which is just very different than leading teams. And so I think you and I are both committed to helping people learn these skills for their organization to be magnetic and thrive. And I think that's what brings us together.
That's right. And so there was an immediate affinity there with you and I as we started problem solving together.
As we started from a different perspective, not why are they leaving, but how can we make it magnetic? How can we, whether it's for $9, how do we coach the right people in the right way? And of course, you delivered a beautiful keynote on our behalf. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's some new things we need to consider or challenge our current status quo because the world's changed, the workforce has changed, the economy has changed. What are the red lights flashing? Now, maybe you share from your perspective.
One of my roles over the past couple of years, I've been the chairperson for the Organization Development Network. I'm currently the chair emeritus. But for the past couple of years, I've been asked to speak on this topic of what is the role of organization development, or OD, in the age of AI? And how is it impacting the workplace? And so I'll answer it from that perspective.
Okay.
And really talk about how I think the role of the manager shifts with artificial intelligence. Because I think that's one of the red lights, is that people are concerned about AI replacing jobs and replacing people replacing skills. And so one of the skills that AI really can't replace is authentic human coaching.
Let's open. So I think there's three words you and I talk. One is authentic and coaching. And then the third word we'll get into is feedback. So let's talk about authentic. Why can't technology be authentic? People are using it for their therapist, but there is a piece missing there.
In a one-on-one conversation, AI can't pick up on the body language, the subtleties, the nuances that a human being can pick up on. AI can pick up on what's been said, but AI doesn't have the intuition to understand what's not being said or what's not being expressed. And so when I think about the role of managers and how it changes with artificial intelligence or in the age of AI, particularly when I think about a manufacturing environment or a technology environment where data and information is key. In the past, we use managers to help interpret data from between levels. And so there are people who are working on the floor, they're collecting information, or information is being collected about them and their work processes and their effectiveness and efficiency. And then you have managers who take that information and they translate that to leadership. Leadership then sets priorities and strategies based on that translated data. And what AI does in the workplace, and what makes it so exciting for people, is that you remove the middleman. You don't need the interpreter. So the data is flowing directly to and from. There's a two-way communication on the floor to top leaders. And so many managers who've been organized around making that translation or interpretation, those are the ones that are really concerned about what their roles are. However, the managers who've really also done a great job of coaching, and that two-way coaching both ways, both up and down the organization, open up and down the ladder, those managers are finding that they're needed now more than ever because they can make that they can pick up on those nuances. They understand things that the data is not telling people both ways, and so that's really important to me, and that's what makes it authentic. And so they have to be kind of trained to have the courage to even become even greater truth tellers in the organization.
So
And so a lot of
I'm going to
yeah.
build on that if you wouldn't
Mhm.
mind. There was an article just out by McKinsey, and they identified that there is only 8% of teams that are willing to speak the truth, to have the hard conversations. Most teams can have 90%, 92%. Oh, we'll talk about all the things. But it's the teams that can have the hard, honest conversations without accusation and retribution that end up being high performing teams. There's high connection and
Mhm.
high confidence and high truth. So this truth teller is such an important thing that is required within the team. I think I also want to say is that we are we have evolved to have connection,
Right.
and AI is not. It's great technology. It's going to do great things for the world, but it's not. Our brains want this human connection because, as you say, is we can see and read each other in ways that a machine just
Mhm.
can't. I don't care how many camera lenses. There's some nuances that are just that they have. And third is the role of the manager is going to continue to expand to not be just directive, but to be coaching and orchestrating and encouraging. And so the skill of a great manager of coaching a whole orchestra of people versus just my little unit is just going to grow, not get replaced because AI has bias. And that data that's coming up to leadership
Mhm.
has to be reviewed, has to be evaluated. It's not perfect. There's problem, and its quality control is not
Mhm.
always consistent. So I'd like to go into the concept of authentic coaching. How do you define what is authentic coaching?
Great question. And just to pick up on what you were just sharing, one of the reasons that people feel that their leaders don't understand, many workers feel that their leaders really don't understand their day-to-day challenges.
Oh, so
And so
true.
when we think about the authenticity and the authentic coaching, a key element is this piece around compassion and empathy. And so human beings need to feel connected. They need to feel understood,
Yes.
listened to, and they want to feel like they're meaningful. We want to feel like we're making a difference
Yes.
even when we don't want other people to contribute to us or we really don't want other people to help us. And so we don't want to be told what to do either, because there's a level of independence with human beings that we have this need for freedom and autonomy as well. And so when we think about the authentic coaching and authentically coaching with compassion, means that I am authentically listening and genuinely concerned about what's important to you. What are your hopes, your fears, your aspirations, your goals? What is your vision? What is your standard? And so it requires that I am willing to suspend my own aspirations sometimes, or suspend my own standards, or my own hopes, and not impose those on you, but to really sit back and listen and genuinely get it. So there's a level of generosity and generous listening when it comes to authentic coaching.
And I fail in that at times because just did it right there, which is it's very hard for me and maybe others
Mhm.
to actually hold back the impulse to speak when triggered from a thought,
Mhm.
and to actually know how you're showing up, not for you and your own motivation, but for them.
Yes.
And I think it. It I don't believe it's an easy skill to really that it's you can learn it, but you have to give up yourself and be there in the moment to really present, to listen without judgment or trying to manipulate and to hear, to be empathetic and understand, even if there isn't a solution to form the connection. And I think that's what you're so great at guiding as part of your expertise.
And so, Russell, I just want to build on what you're saying. So, when you say it's difficult, what are some of the things that have helped you learn to practice that skill? Because I think it comes with practice and intentionality, right?
Yes. So I think over the years, for the 4 decades, I've had the chance to realize the many mistakes I've made through my impulsive response. I've had to
Mhm.
recognize that I am fast in my response, and time helps settle that down. I think our work with Tom and Kelly, who are some of our partners, to just have some more emotional intelligence, to try to be aware that my natural response sits as responsive and directive, but that's not the most effective coaching. And I think that just our discussions have helped me become more aware and listening to you and trying to practice. Now, do I fail? Yes.
Yeah.
But do I believe and try to get better every day? And which I think is all you can ask for leaders and managers, is what I've been practicing on.
Yes, that's it. The key is practice. It's a practice.
It is a practice. So I'd like to build on the coaching to this one concept that people struggle with, which is authentic feedback. This
Mhm.
word feedback, and I think you and I have had many conversations why it's a difficult topic, why people avoid it, what we know why it's important. We can share some of that data, but let's start you off with feedback.
Yeah. So the work that we've been talking about doing, that we do, and the work that you and I talk about all the time, is this whole piece around, as we're coaching with authentic compassion. Feedback is the core tool or element that makes the interaction authentic. If we go back to this whole piece around speaking and listening, if you're only listening, but I'm not getting any feedback from you, or if you're listening generously and patiently, but I'm not getting anything from you, that's kind of a flat, inauthentic interaction, because
Yes.
I know there's something that's going on over there, right? I know there's something going on in your brain, and hopefully what I'm saying is triggering that. And so when it comes to feedback, the way a lot of us have been trained over the years and conditioned is that we got feedback is so multidimensional. And again, this goes back to the piece around the human element, is that when we're giving and receiving feedback, there's so many emotional cues that are triggered. So
Hmm.
so we're traditionally trained to think about what's our approach and what's the content of our feedback. So for example, you give feedback in a soft voice, and you set the stage for, you want to have a neutral environment and things like that. And so we spend a lot of time planning the approach and then the content. I'm gonna give you two things that are positive, and I'm going to sandwich what's negative between what's positive,
Hmm.
and hopefully the positive will outweigh the negative, and you'll feel good about the whole thing. And that we call that a sandwich. But what happens is that in this delivery process, there are so many things that are going on. There's more than just the approach and the content. There is also the context. And the context is, there are two parts of it, but we talk about one part. The context is the context for the person who's giving the feedback. What is my real context? What is my real agenda? Why am I even giving feedback in the first place? And so, am I giving feedback, and typically in a work environment, or even in home and personal relationships, we're giving each other feedback because we want to get somebody to do something that we want them to do.
We're
We
trying to
want
get them to be a little compliant.
right.
Hey,
We want them
honey,
to
can you help me
comply.
out here?
Right, right. We want them to be compliant, either to our standards or to some behavior that we'd like to see from them, or there's something we want them to say or do. And so we're typically coaching for compliance. And so what we're not checking on is what we want, whether or not we have the same standards or aspirations or goals. And even if I have the best intentions, if it doesn't align with your intentions and your aspiration or your standards, it's going to feel negative. I'm either going to feel like you're coercing me into doing something that I don't want to do, or even more subtly, that you're not listening, that you really don't get me, you really don't understand me.
Hmm. Hmm. And these are neuro triggers.
Right.
As a geek of neuroscience, the person receiving the feedback is worried about shame and loss of social status, loss of
Right.
job. The person giving the feedback is trying to be sensitive and seen as a good person. So as you say, there's all these cues happening at neuro speeds that the sandwich doesn't solve the problem, because it's this deep. And I think the point that I always love that you emphasize is, if you're giving me feedback and I can't do anything about it, that's different than you're giving me feedback to help me grow and move forward. Maybe you want to go after those two topics a little bit.
Again, that goes into the context. And so if my context is to help you understand my past hurt or what you've done in the past that really, has me all twisted up and has us tied up right now, I'm often dumping on you then. I'm giving you feedback on, Russell, 3 months ago, when we were in a meeting and you said this or that, it really hurt me. And you're sitting there thinking, you've been sitting with this for 3 months and you haven't told me about it. And I don't even remember that interaction. And I would have corrected it immediately because I care about you. And so that's negative feedback. And there's really no context that can make that positive. There's nothing that I can really say that would make that a positive context. And so when we think about what's the nature, so we do a lot of training and talking in our workshops about what is the nature of negative feedback. And people tend to get it pretty quickly because we've all been victims, I would say, of negative feedback. And so, yeah, that's, so that triggers us, again, as we go to approach problems for the future. If we're not trained or versed on how to become more future focused in our feedback, in our interactions, we continue to feed back into the past. So one of the things that you and I have talked about is this whole process of, continually feeding forward versus feeding backwards.
Yes.
And so,
I think you and I both are emphasizing, if we focus on the positive, we get more positive. If we feed back to the negative, the human being gets the negative. And that's our foundational root from appreciative inquiry, is feeding forward.
Is feeding forward. And we're feeding forward into a common vision of the future and a common standard or a common goal. And the only way we're going to get to that is if we've been talking to each other, both having those authentic conversations around what's important to each of us. So even in a boss-subordinate relationship, if the only thing I can articulate is what's important to the organization or important about the organization, but I don't get at what are the common goals and aspirations for the employee, that the needs of the employee are inseparable from the needs of the organization, I can't feed forward into that person.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just put some context, which is in the recent SHRM magazine, this was just this summer, just came out August. The article was called The Art of Giving Feedback. And I just want to add a few little quotes from it in terms of, why is this such an important topic beyond our own personal belief? Let's just look at some of the data. So some of the data says in good face-to-face feedback, you get a 23% performance improvement versus if you don't give face-to-face feedback. It really does improve performance. The other piece I liked is Gallup found that 80% of employees who received meaningful feedback in the last week, they are more engaged in the workplace. And I think there was one other, is that constructive feedback leads to ownership, and ownership leads to accountability, and accountability leads to team and organizational performance. So this one little step of feedback that a manager does frequently with a positive view has a huge ripple effect when taken with skill, dedication, and consistent implementation. Oh, that's a little bit of the data from this SHRM article just recently out there. And I think it sets up what we're about, which is, we talk about we lead together. And I think we talk about authentic coaching and authentic feedback for just the reason I just mentioned. When we have feedback and there's self-ownership and agency, then the team is accountable to solving their own problems, not sitting around being directive. People want that agency. And then they're solving quicker, better, faster, which helps the business. And you've seen that live in manufacturing. Maybe you could talk about how teams we lead, how they lead together and get feedback and ownership and performance. I'll leave it at that.
So let's talk about how we got to this concept of we lead. And it's tied up in everything you're saying around the ownership and continual improvement processes and the paradoxes that are associated with that. And as you know, as you and I observe some of that cycle that you just talked about from the article, that great feedback leads to ownership, it leads to accountability, and accountability leads to ownership, and ownership leads to transformed results in an organization. And many organizations have these very sophisticated systems for monitoring work processes and process efficiency, quality control, equipment performance, et cetera. And they have real-time metrics and service delivery processes that have all types of protocols and great feedback systems. Yet the human systems that operate these processes, the decision making, the problem solving, the communication, collaboration networks, we only give those periodic attention through annual performance reviews, or if they're doing a great job, maybe they'll have a quarterly or monthly one-to-one, or just episodic training programs. And that's a fundamental design flaw in organizations.
Yep.
That we expect human systems to be self-regulating while we're keeping our hands on the wheels on all of these other systems.
I'm going to put a pause right there. I'm sorry to interrupt. Mm-hmm. There is not a professional sports team that doesn't practice their fundamentals mm-hmm. with feedback every day on their way to becoming their champion. However, absolutely. In business, this is the gets my claw. We expect every person to show up with all their skills, and we don't have an ounce of time for practice, or maybe we'll give you an hour, and then we're expecting World Series performance. And so this periodic review, this kind of quarterly, without in the moment, it's almost insane. It's almost insane right. From a carryover industrial. So I'm interjecting. I'm not listening fully, but I'm coming back to you.
And it's perfect, because I always use that example of every high performing athlete has a coach. They're being coached constantly, and their coach may not play. Their coach can't play the game the same way the athlete plays, but the coach understands what that athlete's goals are, and they're able to sit there on the sidelines and observe them playing. And they're giving them real-time feedback in practice and play. You know, the people run back to the bench. How did I do? Did you see this? Did you do that? You know, so they go out and they perform, and there's someone who's monitoring that performance and that they trust, who understands, and it's authentic, right? It's not, it's genuine.
Okay, that was a huge amount of information to listen to and watch, and I know that. But as a CEO after 4 decades, having made dozens of mistakes, what I certainly know is one of the largest mistakes was not prioritizing the investments in the skill development of collaboration, of communication within the team. We are all under tremendous pressure to deliver profit and deal with uncertainty. We want to deliver at world-class levels, and that requires us to invest in the trust and communication with each other. So in today's episode, we started with the topic of collaboration, and then Joretha and I got into the nuances of coaching with authenticity, providing feedback with authenticity, being compassionate, and the importance that it all builds around in terms of relational intelligence. How you show up, how you are communicating, how the other person is listening, and are you communicating in a way that someone can do something with, especially as it relates to feedback. And so collaboration is the umbrella, relationship intelligence is the layer, coaching with authenticity and coaching with authentic feedback are the supporting pillars that allow your team to perform, that create an operating system to help everyone thrive. So I want to send you the first 3 chapters in my book, Transform or Die, with my compliments. And here's how easy it is. Just send me an email. Send it to russell@kernandpartners.com, russell@KernandPartners NERS.com, russell@kernandpartners.com, and I will immediately send you the link to the 3 chapters and the 10 assessment tools, and I think you're going to find them of instant value to you. So thanks for listening today. Thanks for learning with me, and I look forward to connecting with you really soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Trailblazing Leaders Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes, you're going to find them on all major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. The podcast is also available at our website at kernandpartners.com. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you on our next episode.